Hello from Tel Aviv, and a warm welcome to a new episode of our Vodcast series, Young Progressive Voices from Israel. The format gives a platform to representatives of the young generation in Israel, and it's the place to express their perceptions, their hopes, their fears, and to share these thoughts in difficult times for Israel, for the region, and worldwide with an international progressive audience. My name is Ralf Melzer. I'm heading the Israel office of the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung, and the Vodcast series is a production by Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung Israel. And each of our episodes are co-hosted and jointly distributed with European Social Democratic Youth Organization. And our partner today are the Austrian Socialist Youth, and I'm very happy that Fabian Zickler is with us in Vienna. Fabian is a board member of the Austrian Socialist Youth, and he is with us on Zoom. Hi, Fabian.
Hi, nice to be here.
Thank you. Fabian and I will be jointly moderating our session today, and here in the studio in Tel Aviv are our two guests. Gal Alkalay, she's a civil society activist and a reserve soldier, and next to her is Erez Uzan. Erez is a political activist and leadership member of the Young Democrats. That's the youth organization of the recently formed party, the Democrats, which is a merger from Avodah and Meretz. Welcome to both of you. Nice having you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Let me start with you, Gal. And I would like to ask you, in this current situation, the war is continuing, the Netanyahu government is still in power. How do you actually manage to maintain the protest movement? How do you manage to keep this mobilization of people who are protesting against the situation?
I think the main answer to it is that all of us understand we don't have a choice. Being the first democracy in the Middle East and being a country that was, since it was established a democracy, we have to understand, and I think we all understand, that if we fall, if we're not going to be a democracy anymore, it would impact the whole world. And then understanding that, and that there is no way back from not being a democracy anymore, we really have to fight, and knowing that it's what drives us.
To what extent would you say is democracy under threat in Israel currently?
We're really on the edge of not being a democracy anymore. You can see that the gatekeepers are under a threat of losing their jobs, and you can see there are all type of new laws that are really not democratic laws anymore, and they kind of give it to us a piece by piece. It's really the salami system that we saw in Hungary and Poland, and really we lost the police, so this is a very big step, and I think it's a matter of 2 years top.
We already witnessed these shrinking spaces for critical civil society in the context of the judicial overhaul. And would you say that now, after 7th of October and the war, it's going even worse?
I think they're under the cover of war. They're not afraid anymore. So you can see, so we talked about the salami system and how they used to try and do that way. So under the cover of war, they kind of just take all of the laws that they want to pass and then throw it in our face. It's like, we don't really care about you anymore, so here are a bunch of laws that are about terrorism, even though they're just about voter
suppression.
Yeah. So how would you explain it?
I think that what they're trying to do is to use the guise of the war and the very real emotions that Israelis have, their fears and their to use the fears that Israelis have of terrorism, and to pass laws that are actually aimed at suppressing Arab voters, actually aimed at hurting civil society and critical free speech. And if you oppose these laws, if you oppose the things that they're trying to pass, then you are no longer even labeled as a terrorist supporter. You are a terrorist. As we heard, Likud parliament members calling Gilad Kariv, parliament member from the Democrats recently, just straight up calling him a terrorist to his face because he didn't support a law that was meant to hurt Israeli democracy.
And which impact does this have on your work as the party, the Democrats, in particular you as a youth organization? Are you limited in your possibilities to work, or how you deal with that?
So I think there's two answers really. The first part is, I think we all as young activists, whether it's from a political perspective, from civil society, we feel the movement of, the Israeli public to the right, which was already in motion, but, since the war, is much more palpable. You hear it in the way people speak. You hear it in the way people react to, very basic points that maybe before the 7th of October they would have a tendency to agree with. And so I think we feel that the space is being limited. We feel that the fear is starting to creep in. I remember being, in the protests before October 7th, and people were afraid of police brutality, and people were afraid of false arrests, but it wasn't the same as what it is now. Now I hear people who were very much active in the first wave of the protests saying, no, I can't come to the protest because what if I get arrested, and what if I saw how they beat up my friends and how they arrested people for no good reason. And, I think the past week has been a hurtful reminder.
Great example of that. Yeah.
But on the flip side, from the perspective of a political youth organization, we do have, I think, the liberty that maybe civil society organizations don't have, which is to have much more straightforward answers as to, our positive agenda points and the alternative that the party offers instead of what's going on, and not just being in that position where you're always fighting and saying, we don't want this. We have the privilege of actually saying, no, but we do want this.
I said it in my introduction, Gal, that you're also a reserve soldier, and both of you now describe your work, your engagement in favor of peace and in favor of civil rights and democracy. And at the same time, you see the international picture of Israel, the heavy criticism when it comes to the war in Gaza, and an increasing international isolation of Israel. So how do you deal with that? What are your feelings when you see these international reactions?
I think there are two things that the world doesn't really understand, in my perspective, is first of all, our actions or us as people, we are not our government. So having Netanyahu holding this war is also bad for us. Like, we want to end this war. We want the hostages back. We want it to be over because we want to go back to our lives. And he's using this war, as we said before, as a leverage or as something to distract us from him trying to eliminate the Israeli democracy. So we really need to understand, or the world need to understand, this is a really big part of it, is we are not our government, we are not our prime minister, and we are fighting from within and from... So we have a war in Israel going on, fighting, keeping Israel a democracy, and we have a war outside of Israel that is fighting terrorist groups. We really need to remember that this war started by Hamas invading Israel, killing and kidnapping and doing these most horrible things to people that you wouldn't even imagine how bad these actions that they took are. It's really not. It's not human. Some actions that you can even imagine, and after that they kept shooting missiles at us. They kept trying to keep us in the war. It's not like they want peace, and they are also, these terror groups also holding their citizens under an endless war that they want to keep so they could keep their power. So it's not Israelis against Palestinians, it's Hamas against the Israeli government, I would say.
Fabian, I mean, when you're listening to what Gal and Erez said now, would you say that you, as the young socialist in Austria, can somehow contribute to a more differentiated perception of what's going on here? Do you have the tools and the possibility to politically work in this direction, to not always simplify, to counter a little bit this highly polarized international climate?
I mean, of course, this is a debate that we're following and we're talking about, and where we're trying to put in I say, progressive left-wing perspective to it. I mean, it's hard, but as Gal said, it's not like the Israeli citizens against Palestinian citizens, but like a terrorist group fighting against a right-wing government. So this is not like we were trying to bring a different perspective to it than like sometimes portrayed in media. Yeah. I wanted to ask something because I feel like if you're like in this situation, you must like feel a little bit stuck in between like your own government that you obviously strongly disagree with, that you strongly oppose, and on the other hand, a terrorist group that attacked you. And I wanted to know, like, other groups that you can work together with in Israel, but also other like Palestinian groups that you're working together with.
It's not so simple. I mean, we find a lot of partners in Israel, and even though, as you said before, civil society has been really limited for many years, you know, since as early as 2015, with limitations on civil society receiving donations, etc. And so we feel that, but there are still many partners and new organizations coming up from the protests, and you know, finding the spaces in which we can work together. On the Palestinian side, it's not so easy and not so simple, and we struggle to find partners. That they are there. We know they are there. We talk to them, but I think one of the biggest roles that organizations like yours, Fabian, can have in this issue is to help both sides navigate how we can cooperate, despite the fact that we have very real grievances with each other, and not just with the terrorist organizations that attacked us, but with civil society organizations on the other side who didn't condemn the attack. And we have very real grievances, and they have very real grievances with us, because we say this and not that about the war, and we say this and not that about a particular event in Gaza, and they're very real grievances that we need to address, but we really need international partners to help navigate that field.
That's very interesting, what you said about international partners and what the role can be. It's definitely going to be a takeaway for me from this discussion. Obviously, we are also stuck in a debate because it contradicts to a certain degree to something you also said, that you always should be part of the discussion. So it's obviously difficult to find a position when you're not living there, you know. So this is, I think, where the debate stands with us. So I think having like a a very strong opinion on the situation when you're not living there, when you're not having talked to people who live there, who work there, who do like political work like you there. It's different to to understand the situation. But I totally agree that like international partners can have a stronger role. And to what was just said, this is something that interests me as a political observer also, is that I have the feeling that also in the geopolitical debate, everyone has an analysis of how we came to the situation, but there is not really much debate or proposals how to resolve the situation, how for example the situation in Gaza goes on from here, how Gaza or Palestine should be built up also economically. So I would like to have to hear your thoughts on that, on what could be a path forward in this war.
So I think one of the biggest problems, I'll start with what you didn't ask, which is how we got here. And I think one of the biggest problems is really what you're asking is that we stopped talking about solving the issue, and we caved in to Netanyahu and his partner's agenda, which is that we shouldn't talk about solutions. We should talk about maintaining the situation, calming the situation, managing the conflict, making the conflict smaller or nicer or more, I don't know.
And get it out of the perspective of the people, right?
And we had, the best is maybe a strong word, but the best government we've had for a long time was a unity government between Bennett and Lapid. And Bennett, one of his most famous quotes is that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is like something that we maybe sometimes hurts a little, but we should, mostly ignore. And I think it really clearly seeped down into how regular Israelis think about the conflict. And now after October 7th, and research and polls show this very, very well. More than half of Israelis think that we need to seriously consider solutions to the conflict in the immediate short term. And that's completely different from what was, on the 6th of October. So I think it's a real opportunity for us to, reinvigorate the conversation about what actual solutions to the conflict look like. And actual solutions, I think, to the international community, especially on the left wing, it's very clear. The solutions. It includes partners, working with our partners in the region and internationally to create a long-lasting peace with a Palestinian state. It would have to be with a Palestinian state because that's the only way that you have peace, is with a country and not with terrorist organizations and different factions managing different regions. With international guarantees for Israeli security and for Palestinian security, which we sometimes don't think about. That's what an end to the conflict looks like. And, the issue of rebuilding Gaza and the West Bank and, parts of southern Lebanon and everything, I can go on in my wild dreams about how we can create a new Middle East, but it comes down to, if we can create long-lasting agreements, then the resources and the help from partners in the region is there. The United Arab Emirates have offered to support the rebuilding of Gaza. It's not something that's not on the table. And the Israeli public essentially knows this. It's not very much. So I think it's really the solution is there. It's just we have stopped having that conversation, and we need to go back to having that conversation. And instead of continuing to say, as the left has done for many years in Israel, we want a two-state solution, we want a two-state solution, we want a two-state solution. It's about stopping and saying, okay, Israelis want security. Israelis understand that security comes from international agreements and with and working together with our partners. So this is the story that we need to tell. Not because it's not a lie, it's not a cover-up. It's just retelling the same story in a way that actually speaks to the needs of the Israeli public.
I wanted to raise the question, to what extent you think the economic crisis and the social question is something that has an impact, let's say, for the next elections or for the performance of the new party, the Democrats. So is there something that is completely overshadowed by security and war and the hostages, or is this something that is a topic you in civil society and in party politics are working with intensively, also by creating a convincing party program for the Democrats when it comes to these social and economic issues?
So I think that part of it is that our government is doing everything to take the truth and kind of spin it, so we don't really understand what's going on inside of Israel, and we don't really see the crisis coming, so we're approaching the cliff and we're just going to fall off of it. And then the other thing is that people really just want to live their life. Think about the youngest generation or the next voters. So these are kids that had COVID when they were in school, and then they kind of went out of COVID to very complicated political situation, and then they went into the army, or not even into the army, to high school or whatever, in the middle of a really one of the maybe the worst war that we have ever had as a country. And then these kids, the next voters, what they hear and what they see, it's only Netanyahu. That's what they know. So we have a problem with the narrative, and we have a problem with people just wanting to close their ears and eyes and just, live their lives. And we don't really see a way out of it. So part of what we have to do is change the narrative and say, listen, things were bad, but they don't have to be anymore. And we need to get ready for this social and financial crisis. And the way to be ready for it is to have a plan and actually talk about the fact that it's going to come.
Yeah.
And then you also have to understand that we have, it kind of goes back to the question you asked about rebuilding Gaza. And it's not that I don't really care about building and taking care of Gaza and the Palestinian problem as much as I care about Israel. We have to rebuild Israel first so we could address other issues that we have, and part of it is bringing back people to their homes. Think about Israel has over 100,000 refugees within the country. It's insane. It's a craziest number, and we lost control over the north and the south of Israel. It's a military closed territory right now, and we have an ongoing war that we also have to solve, so we could even come to address the financial problem. And then, on the other hand, we need to understand that it goes way back to things that are rooted gaps between people and between status in Israel that we need to understand that is rooted from the beginning of Israel that we have to fix. Mm-hmm. So it's a very problematic problem.
Yeah.
Fabian?
Yeah, I think I agree with that, and it reminds me of this quote of the German politician Willy Brandt, peace is not everything, but without peace, everything is nothing. And even though, in Austria, we're still in a very safe situation, I think this is globally more relevant than ever. So I agree with that. I would want to raise another question, in some connection with that, because from what I read in the news, critics or criticism of Netanyahu in the question of the handling of the war in Gaza, but also his social policies and the attacks on democracy, on the rule of law, and so on. This is not confined only to left-wing progressive parties, right? So it has been said today already. We talked about the broad government that was formed against Netanyahu. So and also what I read is that at the beginning it was very clear to many political observers in Israel that the whole situation, also like the attack on October 7th, was partly to blame also on like the Netanyahu's government handling of the situation. So there was a lot of criticism, as I read about, like on the Netanyahu government. So I would want to know, like, is this still happening? So is like public opinion still like changing on the government, or is it back to how it was before, or like even like more polarized?
It's shifting towards Netanyahu again, right? I mean, it's unbelievable, but that's
even addressing it is the most, like, that's the core issue that we have, and as activists, and part of it is it's like it's so complicated to actually understand and even try to figure out what people are thinking or seeing these days. And I think as long as they go with their
Judicial reform or overhaul.
So I think it's what we said before. What I said before is that we're fighting over a narrative, and Netanyahu is over his head in trials, and now they just discovered that he was
manipulating
protocols,
and
and that he was taking pictures of or videos of the Minister of Security so he could blackmail him, and yet the Israeli public believe that whatever he says or however they try to shape the narrative is to be true. And this is the thing about populism and about the main I think war, I would say, that we all have. So you talked to us about how Austria is also going through political issues, and I think understanding what we have and what you have, and Hungary and Poland and even the United States right now, is that the Third World War would not be nuclear as much as it would be a narrative war. So we would all have a problem with how stories are told and with the truth.
Yeah.
And we have to fight it right now, so we are not going to have a bigger problem in the future, I think. And Netanyahu is really mastering it. So we need to keep fighting to discover the truth and also to change the narrative.
No, my question was like going in the direction, like the broad criticism of Netanyahu, like, is it still going on, and is there can there be a path forward to find alliances against this government?
So I think the answer is yes. You know, that we can find alliances. We do have partners, even in the right wing, who understand that what's going on has to stop. But you know, the trends that we saw at the beginning of the war with people moving from Netanyahu more to the center and to the left is, I think, a result of sort of a shock. But in reality, there's a very strong base for Netanyahu and for Ben Gvir and Smotrich and for the ultra-Orthodox leaders, because Israeli politics is first and foremost identity politics. And if we don't start changing that, then, you know, then we're in a very big problem for years to come. If we don't start, you know, talking to people as people and not as parts of demographic groups.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it became pretty clear how difficult the situation is and how big the challenges are. But we will not give up the fight, right? And that's the message from today.
Never.
From Tel Aviv.
We can't allow it.
From Tel Aviv and from Vienna. Thank you very much to all of you. Fabian in Vienna, Gal and Erez here in Tel Aviv. It was a pleasure talking to you. And that's the end of this episode of our podcast, but we will be back. We continue, and looking forward to see you in our next episode of Progressive Voices from Israel. Thank you very much.